Welcome to the Catalyst for Growth podcast, a place where we talk about everything under the sun regarding the journey of the professional salesperson. Welcome the host of the C4G Sales Success podcast, John Kailunas II. Take it away, big guy.
Welcome to another episode of the C4G podcast. Today we've got an industry leader, Brian Yarch, who's a CLU, ChFC. What else do you got behind your name, Brian?
LUTCF, IACCP. That's about it.
I know you're sort of a big deal, so that's why I wanted to make sure we get this out. I've worked with Brian all your career, right? We've worked together. So
yep, since I interned with you while I was at Hope College.
Yep, Brian is a financial advisor with Regal, and he's an equity partner. He's one of the people that has led Regal to its accolades over time. And we've worked together for, January, Regal will be 25 years old. So probably 27 years, 26 years. It's been a long time, long run.
About 26, yeah.
So still putting up with each other. We're like an old married couple. So, Brian, tell me a little bit about your experience and your background coming into the industry.
Yeah, so I started after school. I went to Hope College, and then after Hope College, I started working with John Hancock, that came together from an internship I did while I was at Hope College, and started at John Hancock selling long-term care insurance. Didn't really do that well, wasn't all that successful. But I kept pounding the phones, making calls, and eventually it clicked, and I started meeting with people, starting engaging with people, and writing some long-term care business. But with that, I felt like there was more there. I felt there was more planning, more help I could provide to clients. So at that point, probably about a year into it, I decided to start pursuing my securities licenses, and became licensed Series 6, Series 7, 63, 65. Then I have other licenses which are more principal or supervision licenses, like 24, 4, 53, those type of licenses too.
You've got 3 small children. I shouldn't say small, but younger children. If any of them were going to come into the business, what advice would you give them now? I mean, when we got you into the business and you started, it was a pound and ground scheme. I mean, it was just, I think one week you actually did 1,000 dials to get your appointments, and we ran pretty hard that you had to run set appointments. And I didn't really particularly care if you had to make 1,000 calls to get those 8 appointments to net 6. That's old school stuff, the way we did it 30 years ago, 20 years ago. How would you see if Carter, your son, wanted to come in the business? How would you bring him in the business?
I still feel.
Or wait, Carter's really bright.
Yeah, he's
Carter
smart. He probably wouldn't want to go in the business. But I still feel that training is a big aspect of it, and I feel that you need to find a firm or a company that's going to provide you training, because you need that training to be successful in this business. But you also need someone to keep you accountable. So I think having a place to go where they have a strong training program and accountability program is a good place to start.
Yeah, you see like the wirehouses, they have more of a churn and burn. They've got lower payouts, but they obviously they require higher activity, right? There you go through the banks. I think that's sort of difficult really to build a practice when you start with a bank background, and then the old insurance companies, the Hancocks, the New York Lifes is another way. You've got some sort of like hybrids, like a Edward Jones, which has a good training program and those type of things that come in that way. But it's really interesting to see the difference between advisors coming in the business now in comparison to what we did. They're less sales focused, I think, now. And I believe that they're less focused. They're less hungry. They want to pursue sort of a active book that's in place instead of looking to establish a book, right? We all started on the Project 100, the FRAN, right? Friends, relatives, and neighbors. Right. You had to list those all out. I don't even know if they do that anymore. I see a lot of young people that come here and want to join Regal that want to join an existing team. They want to join, they want a salary, plus they want to have a growth of the book. So it's a very interesting dynamic between G1 and G2 advisors. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, I see that as well. And I think, the problem with that is you get people that are complacent that don't have the drive or the hustle to really grow the book once they either take it over or are given certain clients. I think having that hustle at first and having to really scrape and find those clients and work hard to take care of people and help them help you by growing their nest egg or helping them out, assisting them with issues they're having. I think that's harder to really keep going long term if you don't have that hustle at the beginning, if you're just given clients.
It's interesting. I've never thought about it until you said it, but when you have to go get your own client, you have to turn that suspect into a prospect and then into a client. I wonder if the level of service is deeper to retain that customer because you know how hard it was to get it. Instead of being given a client and servicing them, you don't have that history, and you're doing more of a transactional, what am I trying to say here? Relationship, right? Where you're just like servicing somebody.
Right.
Where if you'd gone and you had that first beginning where you made that cold call, you sat in their house, you talked to them about long-term care, and then after you did that, you worked on some of their annuity or you worked on some of their investments, and boom, as you progressed, you have a much deeper relationship. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that affects the service model going forward.
Well, I think it does because you have built that relationship with them. You've started out that relationship with how you want to do things, how you want to progress with it. Whereas if you're taking over an existing book, you're kind of taking over someone else's work.
Or problems.
You're right. And if you don't start right from the beginning and treat them like a new client, I think it does get to be a service relationship more than a real relationship with that client because you're taking care of their issues. Yeah, I get that, but you're really not digging down to the meat of what makes them tick. And you may eventually, but I think it is a lot harder when you take over a book than when you start out with that client initially.
Yeah, it can be, especially depending on who you're getting the book from and or practice from. We'll talk about that here later in the episode. But what's your client philosophy of service? What is the philosophy you have in servicing your clients?
I would say really finding out what the needs are. I think a lot of times we as reps can either think they should be doing something because they're in a certain situation, or we may want to service them a certain way because of the situation they're in. But I think you really need to take a step back and ask a lot of questions and listen a lot and really understand what makes them tick, because just because they're in the same situation as another client doesn't mean that they're going to want the same things. And you could completely not really be taking care of them if you don't fully understand what those needs are.
So when you peel that onion back, you got Mrs. McGillicuddy and Mrs. Jones. They could have the same basic circumstances. Maybe they both worked at Ford Motor Company, right? They're both retiring, but Mrs. McGillicuddy could have completely different dreams than Mrs. Jones, and you focus in on those dreams and the absolute performance to get them there.
Well, right. I mean, what do you want to happen with this money? When something happens to you, do you want it to go to the grandkids? Do you want it to go to charity? What do you want to happen with it? And if you're not using the money now, let's say you've got enough pension or got enough Social Security, I mean, why can't we do some of those things now so that you can see
enjoy
other
the
people
benefit
enjoy?
of it,
Yeah. So, and I feel if you're just doing a cookie cutter approach, or, okay, everyone gets a financial plan, everyone gets this, everyone gets that.
You're like Oprah. Everyone gets a car.
Right.
You get a car. You get a car.
You miss what the real need is.
So inside of Regal, you, myself, and Mark Reuters have a book of business. And just tell the audience how big that book of business is.
So it's about 180 million.
Okay. So we have 180 million. How many clients?
A little over 1,000.
A little over 1,000. So we have it is sort of typical of Western Michigan. We've got a lot of clients, but we have a small client household account number because, we're not a Chicago. We're not in New York. We don't have the larger nest egg. So we work with the mass affluent, right? We do have a lot of blue collar people that we serve and help.
Definitely.
So why do you like that market? I mean, you excel in it. And I'm assuming you like it. I guess I shouldn't make that assumption you like it, but you excel in it. Is it because that's how you grew up, or
Yeah, I would say that.
you think you understand that client better than other clients, demographics?
Yeah, I would say a lot of it probably does have to do with, that's the way I grew up. I grew up in a blue collar household. My dad was a millwright. My mom was a nurse. And it's the type of people I'm used to dealing with and have dealt with my whole life. So yeah, it does make me feel more comfortable, and it allows me to better understand maybe the dynamics of the situation.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at that, how you develop a natural market. I mean, I know years ago we did, through Fidelity, they had a thing called Infinata. Remember when we did that study and we looked at the book, and, historically, this is just sort of an odd thing. And I'm going to sort of just guess the numbers because it's been about 10, 15 years. But when we looked at our book, in my book, before we merged everything together, Grand Rapids, the average, I think it's like 6% Catholic, but my book was 21% Catholic, and I'm Catholic, and how I sort of naturally just progressed to those type of people, even though demographically it was completely out of position for the geographical demographics, and how you just sort of naturally go to your market. We haven't done that in many years, but I think our book was developed just because of the way we grew up. And that's sort of a natural attraction that you hear about in the business.
Well, I think you can relate to them better. And if you can relate to them better, you're going to be more comfortable talking with them and working with them. They're going to feel more comfortable. And it just builds a natural environment, natural relationship.
I think trust is easier built. It's done quicker, and it's more authentic when you're coming from the same background or you understand the same background.
I would agree with that. Because you have some of the same experiences too when you're growing up, or maybe even later in life.
What do you think are the trends we're going to see in the industry? Let's go 5 to 10 years. I mean, you've been around long enough. You're still relatively young to be in your position and have your success, but you got to run in your hair still. And we can all go back and we can pick at any 5, 10 years ago, and we heard this was coming, and it's going to change the industry and this and that. And it never really does. I mean, it moves a part of the industry, but remember the robo-advisors were going to push us all out of business. What do you see in the next 5 to 10 years to sort of change the way we go about as a financial advisor, as a fiduciary? Where do we go about, how will our daily life change in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you think is going to be the biggest catalyst to change?
Well, I think the quickness of information is one of the big changes we've seen in our industry. And I think that drives the markets a lot more than real data, the news. I think people are always watching Fox News, or they're always watching Bloomberg.
That's funny. You're screwing up my question, Brian. I have that question later, but I'll jump in that question after you finish here. But yeah.
And so I think the information has really changed our industry and how quickly people get information. I think also the systems and platforms that people are on, like a Robinhood or, some of these other platforms give individuals more access to information, access to be able to do their own trading, manage their own money. But I think there still is that missing component that we provide of the planning aspect of it and the interpretation of some of these things that are going on. And also, I think the biggest part of it is we still are going to be needed mainly because of the emotional aspect of it.
Yeah, behavioral finance. I couldn't agree more. And I said I had some questions that I thought about asking you, and one of them was, how do you think the media has changed the client's perception of our industry?
Well, I think the media definitely provides a lot of information out to individuals, so they either feel they can do it themselves, it's not really that hard, or it gives them a lot of information so that they have a lot more questions to ask. Or
I think the consumer's overall smarter than they were. I don't know, smart, maybe more informed, but information now it used to be that only the wealthy had information, right? Now you can Google anything, anytime. We were joking earlier in a leadership meeting, you and I today, about like somebody asked a question. It's like, why didn't they just go to YouTube and figure it out? I watch my kids that are, 20 in their mid 20s to late 20s, how they don't even look at owner manuals or anything. They just go straight to the internet and grab the answer when they're trying to figure out something. I think information now is the cheapest it's ever been. Remember when we first started as an independent, the knock was we didn't have the research of the big wirehouses, right?
Right.
Well, now you can buy it. Heck, you can Google it. So information is the cheapest it's ever been and more abundant. I think applying that to your point earlier about taking the emotion out is what wisdom and what we can provide as advisors to people is the application of that information. I think that's really powerful because it's very difficult if you don't have reinsurance to put your life savings in a certain vehicle or do a certain thing with it or a strategy. If you haven't had somebody, it's like measuring twice, cutting once. So I've read it on the internet, but I want to get someone's opinion to understand if this is exactly how to do it. Am I hearing you right?
I think there's a lot of information out there too. And so being able to distill that down and what really matters.
A lot of terrible information.
Who wrote this article that says I should do X, Y, and Z? Was this written by a non-disinterested third party? Was this written by someone that is trying to sell their services for stock research? I mean, if you listen
to any alternative ad out there, right? Like Gold, right? You can put it all in a self-directed. I mean, the idea that an individual would take a majority of their life savings and put it into a precious metal to hedge, right?
Right.
We both believe you should do some of that, but a small percentage, not a majority of. And I have a feeling that when people get that type of information, because it's from a trusted media person, a talking head is endorsing it,
right?
That I'm afraid that they're making the wrong decisions.
Right. Well, they're not making the decisions for the right reasons. They're making the decisions because they're sold on something based on a TV ad, not based on what's best for their situation. And I think that's where you have to ask a lot of questions, what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish by doing this. What do they think is going to happen? Educating them more on, how gold works, what, the fluctuation of it, and, what drives it up and down, those types of basics that help people better understand whether this really is something they should do and not just do it because someone on a TV show said it was a good thing to do.
Great answer, Brian, and I couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to come back and ask you a little bit about politics and religion after the other side of this break. I look forward to having your answers on some of these sticky client situations we get ourselves in with as financial advisors. So on the other side of the break, we're going to be talking about a little bit of politics and religion. All right, welcome back to the C4G podcast. As promised, I told, what everybody doesn't want to talk about, politics and religion, right? In an environment in which you're trying to help people. But if you're listening to this, you're an active advisor or a wholesaler, and you realize that this comes up. It's just sort of a matter of fact in life. And Brian and I on the break were actually talking about two particular clients on two different sides of the aisle and how when we meet with them, that a majority of their conversations are focused on that. So, I want to ask Brian again, when you have a client that comes in, and again, I don't care if they're conservative or they're liberal, that's their right to have their opinion. How do you deal with clients that are so affected by the media that their bias is so deep, one side of the aisle or the other? And the same for religion, right? That some people are so invested in their personal opinion that they really can't listen to others. How do you go about segmenting that and helping them as a fiduciary? Because I know you. I know you're a man of faith. I know your political beliefs. We worked together for a long time, and you're very authentic, and you're also very humble, and you don't put your personal opinions on the table. How do you deal with somebody that does and serve them?
Well, I think first of all, that's one thing I don't do is get into my personal opinions when we're having those discussions. What I try to do is help them take that noise out of the situation. Let's focus on what they're really trying to accomplish and not what's in the news or what they're seeing on TV. Because I feel like if you watch one news station your whole life, you're not getting the full picture. And also if you're watching that one news station, you're also going to social media
and you're following people you like, right? So you're getting a double dose of it, excuse me. You're seeing it from on your phone, you're seeing it on the TV, you're hearing it in your car, because if you're listening to station ABC, XYZ, whatever it is, you're going to continue to listen to that because you like the sound of it. Right. So you keep reaffirming it, and you're not seeing the whole scope of the picture.
Right. Well, and I think too, you have to inform people. So if they have a certain leaning because of their political views, religious views, and that bleeds into how they want to invest their money, that's fine. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. But it's fine that they have those opinions and that's the direction they want to go. But I think it's important for them to understand both sides, meaning, okay, we can do X, Y, and Z. We can either limit you purchasing certain types of holdings or whatever, but by doing that, this is how that's going to affect your portfolio or your long-term goals. Is that something that you are comfortable with? If you are, okay, then let's proceed. But if you're not comfortable with that, let's look at some other options.
You and I have both been in appointments with particular clients, our customers, and they come in very hot and heavy that they're all ESG, they don't want to do this, and then they look at the rates of return versus, and all of a sudden they have a little different opinion.
Right.
And it's always interesting. You get to really see what someone's a true belief versus noise. And I think a lot of younger advisors don't know how to handle that. They just affirm what the person's saying to get closer to a transaction instead of deepening the relationship, a person with reason that they're hiring. You're the person of reason that they're hiring you to obtain their goals. I think a younger advisors just say yes, 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 and agree, and they're all more of a chameleon than they are as an advisor. And it doesn't mean you have to stake your sword in the ground and say, I'm this, I'm that, and if you're not, you don't do business with me. I think in this hypersensitive world we live in right now, that it's more difficult to do for people that haven't defined their own personal business philosophy or are secure in their own ways individually.
Well, and I think too, it's a matter of if you're not comfortable doing something for someone, that's one thing, but you don't have to always agree with them to proceed with working with a client. It is their money. They can handle it how they want.
I know for a fact there's a lot of trades that people have asked us to do because their brother-in-law told them or this or that, and we always sort of segment that to another private account, as a smaller account, and let the client work with that on their tips and quotes, because we don't want it to affect the overall absolute plan in which we're trying to get them to that particular goal or need. And I know we've done that many, many times.
Yeah, we've done that. And we've also told people, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you. You might have to do this elsewhere because this is not something that we feel comfortable doing, which is different than saying we don't necessarily agree with you, but if you want to do that, we can help you out with it.
Yeah, there's a mutual client. I won't say his name, obviously, for privacy rules, but a physician here that we worked with in the past who wanted to buy wine futures and nitrogen engines and all this other stuff. And we just had to tell the client that, it's not what we do. We're not taking chasers. It's not our philosophy as a firm. And, we've lost a couple clients because we weren't chasing that stuff. But I think overall our book is healthy. It keeps growing. It keeps building. And I think that's a testament to how we manage the clients and their expectations.
Well, and I think it's a matter of not just saying yes or no. It's a matter of asking questions of why. Why are you doing this? And also then, having the discussion, okay, well, if you do this here, this is the outcome or the likelihood of this happening or this happening. And so does that make sense to you, or would you rather do something different, knowing you now have more information than you had before?
And of course, always document, right? Especially they're going on a flyer.
Well, I think you need to make sure that clients fully understand what they're doing and that you document the conversations you've had with them.
Let's talk about fees, because I know you and I are both very strong on this. We don't negotiate a lot of fees. How often do fees come up in your conversations with clients and prospects?
Well, I mean, they come up when we talk about them, and that we
they come up because of the rules and regs of the industry.
So we're disclosing it to them, and we talk to them about the fees. But it rarely comes up as an issue.
Why is that?
Well, I think they understand the value that they're getting, and maybe there is a guy that's cheaper, and maybe he does what they want them to have done. To maybe he's doing what they want. Okay, that's fine. Maybe you're just not a good fit for us. But I think it's important to discuss the fees. We're not afraid of talking about making money because that's what we do. This is a job. This is not something we're doing for volunteers. So I think discussing fees is fine, and we have no issue with that with clients. And in most situations, we don't really have any pushback. And sometimes I can get it cheaper elsewhere. Well, that's fine. You can do that. I mean,
but I can't think of a client recently. I mean, we've lost some because of economics, but we don't normally have any problems with it. I mean, they know what we're there for them all the time. They know that we're working for them. We communicate with them regularly. We're meeting with them regularly. We're talking about our process and our value. So we don't get a lot of these, but when I started doing this podcast, I had a lot of younger advisors that, well, how do you discuss your fees, or is this too much, or is that, and they seem more apt about coming up with their pricing sheet than they are talking with clients about solutions. Do you see that as well, that the younger advisors get fixated on that?
Yeah, I just think mainly it's because they haven't had enough experience. They haven't had enough discussions to feel comfortable with it. I think a lot of it just comes down to experience and being comfortable having those types of discussions. Clients know you're making money. And so it does you no good to not have those discussions very clearly at the beginning so everyone understands what the rules of engagement are. And once you have those discussions, clients are usually happy and satisfied and have no issues with it. It's the ones where you don't have the discussion. There's, and they're afraid, and then the client finds out later, and then that's usually not a positive conversation.
And we've found that out with a couple books that we've purchased, that the economic arrangement between the old advisor and the client, they didn't really understand it. And when we explained it to them, they sort of took a step back. And then with our service model, they've embraced it. But they were sort of, I know you've had some conversations that people were a little bit shocked, just that they'd probably forgotten. I mean, some of these clients, these conversations, they're easy to forget. So I know there's been times where when we've gone through and talked to clients and reemphasized our value prop versus the fees, we haven't lost any clients that I can recall. I'm sure we have, but I can't recall them. But usually they're embraced by us and they appreciate what we do and the value we bring.
Right. I think it's being very clear about that up front. And I think you're right. When you work with a new client, there's a lot of information that they're absorbing. There's a lot of things you're absorbing from the client.
It's tremendous amount of information. I mean, you look where you started. I mean, you could do an annuity application literally on a pamphlet. And now, I mean, we don't do a lot of annuities, but now it's so much more complicated, right? Everything is more complicated, and the disclosures on top of disclosures, very thankful that under your leadership that we went electronic before COVID. We'd have been a world of hurt if we hadn't, with you and Bill making those decisions to bring us further ahead as a firm. But the clients don't remember all of that, and I don't know a way to make them remember all of that. It's a tremendous amount of information, Well,
and it's something that, sometimes will come up in reviews, and we discuss those things so that, they're comfortable with it, and also discussing what the value is we provide and what the purpose of those fees are for.
If you had to go back as a young advisor starting off, what do you know now that you wish you would have known 25 years ago?
I think it's less about whether you bring someone on as a client, and it's more about helping people out. And I think when you're a new advisor, a lot of times you're worried about giving away information for free. And so people ask you questions, and I don't want to tell them all of that. They're not a client yet. I think sometimes as a young advisor, you may be not willing to be as open with your conversations with individuals, where now it's, hey, I'm here to help people out. If you want to eventually work with me, great. But if you don't, that's fine too. As long as I know I was able to answer your questions and help you out and get you to a place where you want to be.
Is that because the book is big enough now and it's sustaining itself, and it's a true viable business? I mean, with $180 million, that's a bit of a luxury. I mean, some people are listening. It's a smaller book than they have, but majority of the people, it's a larger book than they deal with. Do you think that's given you that philosophy, or?
I think it gives you a little more comfort. Yeah, I think it does. But I think a lot of it is experience too.
I think I go back and watching you in the business started, you sort of always had that, and maybe that's just your demeanor, that you're a very honest person and you're a man of few words. And when you say something, people can accept it or they don't. Your feathers really don't get ruffled. I've never seen you because someone didn't want to do business, or even, when you were younger and you were struggling, you were frustrated. You weren't having success, but you weren't frustrated at the person.
Right.
Maybe that's just a character trait you've been blessed with. I don't.
Well, I think, people are either going to connect with you or they're not. And I think there's plenty of opportunity out there. There's a lot of people that need help. And I think it's better worth your time and energy to move on and help those individuals that want your help than to try to talk someone into working with you and wanting your help.
No, Brian, it's been great talking with you in this format. We don't normally do this. So I want to ask you one fun question here at the end. And I don't know the answer to this, and I think I know you pretty well. So I've got a whole list of questions that I've written out, or fun questions. I'll save the paranormal question for Carlson because he's from the UP. So even though you were growing up in northern Michigan, I don't think you had those paranormal experiences. But if you could go back to any historical event, which one would you choose to watch? And I'm going to guess, and I'll see if I'm right, but a historical event that you'd like to witness, not participate in, but just witness in real time.
Oh, that's a tough question.
So I'm asking it. There's no cherry walk coming on this podcast, Yarch. Come on.
I don't know that I can say one historical event, but I can say read through the Bible multiple times, and I think there's just several things in the Bible that I would have loved to experience at some point in time throughout the Bible, but I can't think of one specific one that.
I thought for sure it was going to be a religious reference with you because I know you're a man of faith, and I thought you were going to say the Last Supper.
Okay.
And to see that event and to watch how that all unfolded in the rise of Christ. And that's what I thought you would have gone. I mean, that was just a pure guess, and we've never had this conversation. So it's just sort of a fun question I like to ask people to get to see a different side of a successful advisor.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if thinking about if I had to rank it, I would probably rather see David and Goliath before the Last Supper, but I could be.
Oh, there you go. Why would you pick that?
I think it's just a very unique event. I think it's, the underdog coming out over top. It's a very triumphant event. Seems almost unbelievable at times, but also believable. So I don't know. I think it'd be just cool to witness someone like David have that much courage to do that. So
that's why I love those questions, because I never knew that about you. I love that answer. And that gets to let me know you a little bit better. That's a great answer. And I wouldn't even have thought of that until you brought it up. So thank you for sharing that. So again, appreciate everybody listening today. This is Brian Yarch from Regal Investment Advisors, Regal Holdings, Regal Financial Group. We've got a bunch of companies, and Regal, Brian has been here since day one, helping us build the firm. He's done an outstanding job, and I'm proud to call him not only my partner, but my friend. So thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you, John. Appreciate the time today.
All right. You have a wonderful day, buddy. And everybody who's listening, tune in next week for a new episode of C4.
Hey, thank you for your time today. We will have another content-packed session posted next week. Please check our website, catalystforgrowth.org, for our legal disclosures on the bottom of our homepage, if you're into that sort of thing.